before we get into our lesson this morning, I did want to remind everybody, of course, next Sunday is Fellowship Sunday. I think Mike announced that, but we don't want to forget it. But also, in a couple more weeks after that, on the second Sunday in September, Jesse is going to be preaching for us that Sunday. So he's looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you're all looking forward to it too. So we're looking forward to him sharing a lesson with us. And of course, we don't want to forget either that coming up at the end of September is going to be our homecoming, the decoration day, and of course we'll have a fellowship meal that Sunday, and evening service that Sunday, and then the nightly services through Thursday with all of the different speakers. We'll try to get some flyers printed up for next week so we can start getting those handed out, as they'll be within a month away. But we want to let everybody know. And then, of course, the house-to-house should be coming in the mailboxes for those that are in the 4 mailing routes nearby here, so with the announcement in them as well. I'm also hoping to be able to, on the sermon that be playing on TV, we'll have a little card at the beginning of it that will show the announcement about that as well, so that'll be on there when that starts as well. So we want to remember all of those things. Of course, we're discussing for the past couple of weeks, and will be for a few more weeks, the crucifixion of Christ. Does that picture disturb you? Does it make you squirm a little? Mm-hmm. It should. I know that's obviously not a real picture of Jesus, but a portrayal of it. But I think sometimes that can help us get an idea of what it was really like. We're going to talk about a little bit about what it was like to be at that crucifixion. I know we've been doing the 7 sayings of the cross, but there's a little interlude there before the 3rd saying. We've covered, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. We've covered, truly I say to you today, you'll be with me in paradise, that he said to the thief. Before he talks to his disciple John and his mother, we want to talk about those that stood by. Now, they're stood by, or some translations, they're stood nearby, these individuals. And we're going to see those people that stood near the cross of Christ. Now, here we are, we're looking, this is just a picture. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be standing there by the cross with someone you loved and cared about hanging there, bleeding, the blood mingling with sweat, tears, the embarrassment and the shame. Paul talks about, or the writer of Hebrews talks about how we need to go to him outside the city gate carrying the shame. Not be ashamed of the shame of the cross. I know it's not a pleasant thing for us to think about, but it's a necessary thing for us to think about. Because if we forget the cross, then we forget why we're here. We forget what it's all about. The cross is the pivotal point in human history. Everything revolves around the cross of Jesus. So as we consider this, let's look at John 19, verses 25 through 27. Now there stood by the cross of Jesus his mother and his mother's sister, Mary the wife of Cleophas, and Mary Magdalene. And when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by whom he loved, he said to his mother, Woman, behold thy son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold thy mother. From that hour that disciple took her into his own home. We're going to look at the sayings to his mother and the disciple another time. But we want to look today at these people that were standing by the cross of Jesus. In Mark 15, verses 40 and 41, It says, there were also women looking on, among whom was Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James the Less and of Joseph, and Salome, who also when he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered unto him, and many other women which came up with him unto Jerusalem. So we see these lists of names of the people and descriptions of the people that were standing there. And I want to think about, as we think about people standing by the cross, you notice who wasn't in that list. He mentions the one disciple, the disciple standing by whom he loved. But that's the only one of his disciples that's mentioned. Where were the rest of them? Well, they had already run off the night before. Peter had followed at a distance to the trial, but then when he had denied Jesus 3 times, he went out weeping, and as far as we know, he wasn't at the cross. He had denied Jesus, and he didn't probably feel like it would be right for him to be there at that point. But the church needs standbys, reliable old standbys, not just bystanders. You see, there were many bystanders at the cross that day. Possibly hundreds of people looking on, mocking, laughing about it. But there were only a very small handful of standbys. In John 19, we have 5 mentioned. In Mark, it talks about many other women which came up with him to Jerusalem. So maybe there were more women there than are listed by name. But only a few. And the crowd, of course, that had been yelling, "Crucify him," mocking him, laughing at him. You know, in our lives, there is a time when where we stand and what we stand for and who we stand with is the most important thing. We need to know where we're standing. So let's begin with, there stood by the cross of Jesus, first of all, his mother, Mary. We don't know what's happened to Joseph. After the situation in Luke 2 at the age of 12, when Jesus is at the temple and they forget him and have to come back for him, we don't read about Joseph again. We don't know whether has Joseph died. Is he just still working? We don't know. The indication is that probably that Joseph has passed at some point along through here, but we don't know for sure. But he's certainly not involved like Mary is with the ministry. He doesn't come to Jerusalem. He's not standing here at the cross. And you would think that the kind of man he was, he would have been standing there if he was still alive. But we don't know for sure. In Luke chapter 2, verses 33 through 35, Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken of him, and Simeon blessed them, and he said to Mary, his mother, "Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising again of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against. And yes, a sword shall pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed." Now I could imagine, as Mary's standing by the cross, that sword is piercing through her heart. I have talked with parents who have lost children. And they say there's nothing that compares to the pain and agony of that. And even more so, a public display like that in front of everybody, an execution of her firstborn son. I don't know if any of us can even imagine what she was going through. And yet, she was there. She did not back down. She did not run away. She didn't hide. She was standing right there while it happened. The love of a mother for a child is immeasurable. At least the love of a good mother for her child. I know there are mothers that don't love their children, but for the most part, most mothers love their children. And that's a good thing. But it's a painful thing. So his mother was standing there. We see also that there stood by the cross of Jesus his aunt, Salome. She's named Salome in Mark chapter 15. She's just called his mother's sister in John chapter 19, rather. But this is Salome. Mark 15, 40 and 41 names her. She is the mother. She is the mother of Zebedee's children. She is sister to Mary. James and John most likely are Jesus' cousins. And she was rebuked by Jesus on one occasion. Matthew 20, verses 20 through 23. Then came to him the mother of Zebedee's children with her sons, worshiping him and desiring a certain thing of him. And he said to her, "What do you want?" And she said to him, "Grant that these my two sons may sit, the one on your right hand and the other on the left, in your kingdom." And Jesus answered and said, "You don't know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I shall drink? To be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with?" They said to him, "We're able." And he said to them, "You shall indeed drink of my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left is not mine to give. It shall be given to them for whom it is prepared of my Father." She's bold to ask Jesus, "Hey, let my sons be your two chief lieutenants. Put them in charge." Bold. But he says, "No, that's not even mine to give. The Father's going to decide that." But Salome, sister of Mary, mother of James and John, she is there, standing by the cross. Even though she was rebuked by him, it didn't turn her away. She didn't say, "Well, he was mean to me, so I'm not going to follow him anymore." She recognized the correction, took it, and continued to follow. And we need to be like that as well. There are times in our lives when we are going to say or do things that God's going to have to discipline us for. It's going to be unpleasant. And when that happens, we need to be ready to straighten up and do right. And then there stood by the cross of Jesus Mary, the wife of Cleophas, the mother of James the Less and Joseph. James the Less, we know, is another of Jesus' disciples. You know, you kind of wonder, where are James and, well, we know where John is. He's here. Where's these two Jameses? James, the brother of John, son of Zebedee, and James the Less. They're not here. Their mothers are here. They're brave enough to come, but their boys are not. Luke chapter 24 and verse 13 through 18, we see how close this family is with Jesus. Mary, the wife of Cleophas. Cleophas is one of the ones that Jesus speaks with on the road to Emmaus after his resurrection. Luke chapter 24, verses 13 through 18. Two of them went up the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 80 furlongs. And they talked together of all the things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were hidden, that they should not know him. And he said to them, What manner of communication are these that you have with one another as you walk, and are sad? And one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered and said to him, Are you only a stranger in Jerusalem, and do not know what has come to pass there in these days? So here's Cleopas talking with Jesus, walking with Jesus after his resurrection. He wasn't standing at the cross, but his wife was. Now, we don't know. He may have been working. He may have not even known what was going on. He may have been in another town and might not have even known that Jesus was being crucified at that moment. It happened rather suddenly. They came and arrested him at night, took him to 6 monkey trials, just, kangaroo court trials, and then had him crucified. By 9 o'clock the next morning, he's hanging on the cross. So they didn't waste any time. So it's very possible that some of his followers that weren't with him that night when it happened wouldn't have even known until after the fact what was going on. They could have been, like I said, they could have been off in another town. They could have been working. They could have not even known what was going on. But here we see Cleopas's mother, Cleopas's wife, the mother of James the Less and Joseph, and her name is also Mary. We've got 3 Marys standing here at the cross. 3 women named Mary, and then Salome as well. And of course it had said of Salome, she had been with him and ministered to him when he was in Galilee. And then there are some other unnamed women possibly here as well. But then we see also that there stood by the cross of Jesus Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was special to Jesus. She was a unique individual. In Luke chapter 8, in verses 1 and 2, we learn about how she came to know Jesus. It says, It came to pass afterward that he went throughout every city and village, preaching and showing the glad tidings of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and certain women which had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities, Mary called Magdalene, out of whom went 7 devils. So that's how they met. He cast 7 demons out of her. I don't even know what it'd be like to have 1 demon in you. But 7? She must have been a real nightmare to be around. We read about the guy that had the legion of demons in him in the graveyard, and he's terrorizing everybody. They can't even have a funeral there, because here's this guy with the demons in him, coming up. But 7 demons were cast out of her. Jesus said, to whom much is forgiven, he loves much. The one who's forgiven much loves much. But to whom is forgiven little loves little. Mary seemed to love Jesus a lot. And can you imagine if 7 demons were cast out of you? Wouldn't you love the person that did that for you? Mary, no doubt, felt a great debt that she knew she could never repay to Jesus, and did everything she could to make it up to him. In Mark 16, verses 9 through 11, after his resurrection, it says, Now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast the 7 devils. I mentioned that again. That was her defining trait. She was the Mary that had 7 demons cast out of her. It separates her from all the other Marys. And she went and told them that had been with him as they mourned and wept. And they, when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, did not believe. Well, you can imagine. With her history. Do you believe the woman that used to have 7 demons? But Jesus appeared to her first. She didn't recognize him at first. She's at the tomb weeping. And he appeared to her and she thought he was the gardener. And she said, "Oh, my Lord's missing. If you know where he is, tell me where you've laid him." And she was weeping. And then he said, "Mary." And when she heard his voice, she knew. And I'm sure there was something special about the way he said Mary when he talked to her. Don't know what it was. But as soon as she heard that voice saying her name, she knew immediately, and she turned and she said, "Rabboni," Master, Rabbi. And she fell at his feet and worshiped him. Genuine repentance expresses itself in thanks-living, not just saying thanks. It changes the way we live. If Christ has cleansed you of your sins, cast out the things in your life that controlled you and drug you down into sinful things, restored you to purity and innocence again, won't you live like it? Won't you live a life of thanks to him? And then we see the fifth thing. Now, the fifth person there that was standing near the cross of Jesus was the disciple whom he loved, John. John 21, verses 20 through 24. Then Peter, turning about, see the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who had leaned on his breast at supper and said, "Lord, which is he that betrays you?" Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, "And Lord, what shall this man do?" Jesus said to him, "If I will that he tarries till I come, what is that to you? Follow me." Then the saying went around among the brethren that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say to him, "You shall not die," but "If I will that he tarries till I come, what is that to you?" This is the disciple that testifies of these things and wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. John, the disciple that leaned against Jesus' breast at the Last Supper. He was the one closest to Jesus in so many ways. He's the only apostle of the 12. Of course, Judas is already dead by now, but of the 11 remaining, he's the only apostle there. He's the only male disciple of any kind standing with this group of women at the cross. He's often called the disciple whom Jesus loved, but he could also be called the disciple who loved Jesus. He wanted to be with Jesus even at his dying. He went, when Jesus was taken away and the other disciples fled, he went to the trial with Jesus. He went inside, and he got them to let Peter in as well. He went in. Peter made promises. "Oh, I'd die for you. I'll never leave you." But John's the one that's standing there at the foot of the cross. He's the one that lived it. He didn't make the big boasts. He just quietly did what he was supposed to do, what he should do. But that brings us to the idea here. There stood by the cross of Jesus mostly women. Sometimes women are called the weaker sex. Men look at women as somehow inferior to them. But Jesus never did. And God didn't. God created Eve to be Adam's helpmeet, not to be his servant or his slave or inferior to him in some way. The old saying is that he took from Adam's rib so that she would walk beside him, not from his foot that he'd walk on top of her or anything like that. But here, mostly women are standing there. Where would the church be without the women that are part of it? Of all the churches that I've ever been to from the time I was a child through the churches that I've preached for, every one of them has had more women than men. And this congregation is probably the most evenly balanced of any that I've been in, and yet still, as we look around, we see there are a few more women than there are men. Not a big imbalance like in some. In churches, anywhere from 60% to 80% are women. Some churches, it's just a slight imbalance, only 60%. In some, it's 80%. I've seen some churches where it was closer to 90%, that it was almost all women. Where would the cause of Christ be without those mothers, grandmothers, wives, sisters, daughters, all of those who serve Christ and help serve his church? All these listed by name, there are 5 listed, 4 of them are women. That's 80%. And then it also says, and many other women which came up with him to Jerusalem. So, John was outnumbered considerably by the women who cared about Jesus and followed Jesus. It seems to be always the case. How many of the places, we think about Philippi, where they were looking for believers. They went out to the river and they found women there praying. They didn't find a group of men. There weren't enough men to have a synagogue, but the women were still there praying. Women are devout so many times. And throughout the book of Acts, as we've been studying on Wednesday night, it talks about the devout women this and the women of good character that. And it's mentioned so many times. If it said that the man is to be the head of the household, then the woman is the backbone. And many times she's the one that turns the head. You know, we think about how our society and other societies have belittled women, but Jesus never did. Jesus considered women to be a great asset for the kingdom. And then we want to see also, I missed one here. Did I? Oh, I missed the number 6. Sorry. Deleted that slide somehow. Mostly women slide's not up there. I've got this one up here. So the 7th thing we want to notice is that there stood by the cross of Jesus people of great character. Standing next to the cross of a man who has been accused of treason against the emperor and being associated with him puts you in great peril, great danger. There was a danger to them as followers of Christ, and then to be standing there at the foot of the cross. They were strong and courageous. It's interesting, 1 Corinthians 16, verses 13 and 14 says, "Watch you and stand fast in the faith. Equip yourselves like men and be strong. Let all things be done with charity." In this case, maybe we ought to equip ourselves like the women that stood by the cross, because they were courageous. They didn't back down. They didn't run away and hide. Great fortitude and courage. We talked about this image. Consider what they witnessed as they watched these scenes unfold. As they watched and listened as Jesus said those final words from the cross, as he hung his head to die, as the soldiers came by and pierced him in the side. And we we look at this image and we think, that's kind of the image that we have in our mind of it. This is a softened image for us. Everything historically is that the Romans did not care enough about those they were executing to give them the dignity of a loincloth. Jesus was hanging there fully exposed. Humiliation was the name of the game with this punishment. They weren't going to give them any sense of decorum at all. No respect whatsoever. In John 19, in verses 23 and 24, the soldiers that crucified Jesus took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one to each soldier, and the inner garment. The inner garment was seamless, woven throughout from the top, and they said, let's not tear it, but let's cast lots for it. So they even cast lots for his inner garment, his underwear. They took it all. He was left to hang there naked and ashamed, embarrassed, for all to laugh at and to mock. These were people not only of fortitude and courage to face that and to hear the mocking of the voices around them, knowing those people would probably like to see them hanging up there too, to laugh at them. But they were also people of love and affection. 1 John 4:18 says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. How were these people able to stand at the foot of the cross when we talked about the danger? I mean, they could have been arrested. They could have been. Remember, that's why Peter denied Jesus. Oh, you're one of them. You were with him. Oh, no, not me. I don't know him. How could they stand there? Because their perfect love for Jesus cast out the fear of what might happen to them. We need to develop that deep love and affection for Jesus so that our love for him will cast out our fear that we might have of what could happen to us. Also, they were people of compassion and sympathy. They could not bear to leave him alone in his final moments, final hours. They couldn't abandon him. They were too compassionate, too sympathetic to him. Even when he cried out to his Father, my God, why have you forsaken me? His mother was standing there. She didn't forsake him. These other women and John, they didn't forsake him during that difficult time. They just couldn't bear to leave him alone. Now there's nothing more depressing, I guess you could say, than to think about a human being dying alone with no one there. It's one of the saddest things that can happen to a person on this earth. But they were also people of self-control. They didn't run away, but they also didn't stir up trouble or cause a fight or anything like that. They simply stood there for Jesus. Hebrews 13:13. Let us go therefore unto him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. And it's something for us to think about. We obviously weren't alive then. But we have to ask ourselves today, where are you standing? Are you standing with the crowd that's mocking Jesus? Are you just one of those that just walks by and looks and goes on about your daily business? Or are you one of those standing by the cross of Jesus. You see, where you stand in life will determine where you'll stand in judgment. And there are times in our lives where we may not be able to take a step forward, and it's all that we can do to stand. But we need to stand. Stand with Jesus. Stand for Jesus. Stand with those who are standing with Jesus. Because where we stand matters the most. If you're here and you're not standing with Jesus, you need to make some changes in your life to get yourself where you ought to be, so you're standing with him instead of against him. Or so you're standing with him instead of walking away from him. Or whatever else might be the case. You want to be on his side. You want to be with him, standing for him. If you're here and you have a need to respond to God's invitation for any reason, please do as we stand and sing our invitation song.
Bring Christ, your
Broken
life,
so marred by